Yeah, you know who it is, and for those of you that don't, I'm Cytonius, the opposite of the phoniest. Whoa! And this is not positive Asian representation.
I protest!
Oh, darling, I am sorry, but I lost my key.
But that was 2 weeks ago. You cannot go on or keep ringing my bell. You disturb me. You must have a key made.
So that clip is from one of the most famous and critically acclaimed movies of all time. The 1961 film adaptation of the 1958 novella, Breakfast at Tiffany's. And as a lifelong fan and student of mass media, specifically mass media that reflects Asian culture, I just want to say, yo, fuck that movie. It's been 60 plus years since the film was released, and while we've had some positive strides in Asian representation in American film, I just have one important question. Yo, where the fuck is Shang Chi at, man? In 2021, we would get the live action film adaptation of the Marvel Comics martial arts superhero, Shang Chi. And in the 5 years since the film was released, we have yet to see a cameo or major announcement about when a Shang-Chi sequel starts production. Shang-Chi would be one of the most culturally significant films of all time. It would be the first American-produced superhero film with a predominantly Chinese cast. And, in my opinion, it would be one of the best films in Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In the world of comics, Shang-Chi would make his first appearance in 1973 in the anthology series Special Marvel Edition in issue 15, which would later be renamed The Hands of Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu. He would be the creation of legendary writer Steve Englehart and legendary artist Jim Starlin. But several pop culture influences played an important role in the development of Shang-Chi as a comic book character, one of which was the character Kwa Chang Caine from the 1970s television series Kung Fu, starring David Carradine, who, in case you didn't know, is not Asian. Originally, Shang-Chi was conceptualized to be a comic book adaptation of the Kung Fu television series for DC Comics, but the idea was rejected and brought to Marvel, who agreed under the condition that the comics include the pulp novel character, Dr. Fu Manchu. In the comics, Shang-Chi was the son of Fu Manchu and an unnamed white woman. So, who is Fu Manchu? Well, Fu Manchu is a villainous character who appeared in pulp novels and various films throughout the early to mid 20th century. He was created by European novelist Sax Rohmer and is one of the first mainstream characters in American media to be depicted in yellowface. For those not familiar, yellowface is a racist aesthetic used by non-Asian performers to portray Asian people in mass media. Hollywood has participated in racist yellowface stereotypes since its inception, with actors like Swedish-born Warner Oland and his portrayal of Asian characters like Fu Manchu and Charlie Chan. Other examples include Canadian silent film actress Mary Pickford and her portrayal of Cho Cho Chan in 1915's Madame Butterfly. We would also see the legendary, but also racist and misogynistic film legend John Wayne as Genghis Khan in the 1956 box office bomb, The Conqueror. Hollywood's presentation of yellowface in the early 20th century is tied to another racist concept, yellow peril. The term yellow peril would be a racist metaphor used to describe Asian people as an existential threat to the Western world. The term would first be used in the 1897 essay titled Le Pays Religion, written by Russian sociologist Jacques Novikov. Yellow peril would be used to justify extreme racism and bigotry of Asian immigrants during the late 19th and early 20th century, which saw large-scale migrations of Asian people into the United States. The racism and xenophobia directed towards Asians in America would be reflected in several ways. Things like the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 would stifle socioeconomic progress for Chinese immigrants in the United States. This legislation would be passed in response to an increase in Chinese laborers that was perceived as a threat to the job security to white American laborers. This would lead to widespread prejudice and bigotry towards Chinese immigrants, which would be widely reflected in American mass media. Television and film would be used as a form of propaganda to paint Chinese people as regressive and uncivilized compared to Americans. But another medium would also be used to paint Asian people as a villainous and devious substandard foreign threat. While known for its larger-than-life superheroes that stand for truth, justice, and the American way, the American comic book industry has a deep and dark history of racist portrayals of non-white individuals. In 1936, National Allied Publications would launch the anthology comic book series, Detective Comics. The cover of issue 1 would feature a devious-looking Asian man that would play into Yellow Peril sentiments of the era. This trend would continue in the comics with the creation of other Yellow Peril comic book characters, with villains like the Yellow Claw, the Mandarin, and even Ra's al Ghul. While there would also be heroic Asian characters in comics around this time, such as Detective Wu Yin Jet, aka Jimmy Woo. Yeah, him. And the first ever Chinese American superhero to be created by a Chinese American artist and writer, which would be Chu F. Hing's The Green Turtle. Neither of these characters would do much to reduce anti-Asian sentiments in American mass media. It would actually be one man and one man only who would change the xenophobic status quo of 20th century anti-Asian sentiments in American mass media and beyond. And that would be none other than...
My last name is Lee, Bruce Lee. I was born in San Francisco in 1940. I'm 24 right now.
It's my biased opinion that no single human being has had as significant of an impact on global pop culture as Lee Jun-fan, or, as he's better known, Bruce Lee. While originally starting as a child actor, Bruce Lee's film career as an adult kung fu force of nature would act as a counterpoint to negative Asian stereotypes in pop culture. Bruce Lee would exist as an avatar of Chinese superhuman altruistic masculinity. Bruce Lee's emergence as a cinematic symbol of Chinese heroism would create the framework for the martial arts comic book superhero subgenre, a genre that would actually be dominated by white characters like DC Comics' Richard Dragon and Marvel Comics' Iron Fist. But it would be Shang Chi that would be the first popular Asian comic book superhero character in American mass media. While the martial arts comic book genre would thrive throughout the 70s, the genre, along with Shang-Chi's popularity, would decline throughout the 80s and 90s. While the character would make sporadic appearances in comics, he wouldn't appear in animation and video games during the 80s and 90s like many of the other Marvel Comics characters. There were discussions of a Shang-Chi television series in the 80s that would have starred Brandon Lee, the only son of Bruce Lee. There were also discussions of a Shang-Chi movie in the early 2000s that was supposed to be directed by Stephen Norrington, the director of the 1998 Blade film that starred Wesley Snipes. None of these projects would come into existence due to the obscurity of Shang-Chi and the declining mainstream popularity of kung fu films in the United States. In order for a successful Shang-Chi movie to happen in the 21st century, several things would need to happen. First, there would need to be a comic book movie renaissance that legitimizes superheroes in the mainstream. Check. The second, and probably most essential thing, especially for Shang-Chi, would need to be a Chinese cinematic renaissance in the United States. While Chinese films have had prominence in the US since the 70s, thanks to Bruce Lee, it would be the 1990s that would see a massive wave of Hong Kong actors emerge as pop culture icons in Hollywood. Hong Kong movie stars like Chow Yun-fat, Michelle Yeoh, Jet Li, and of course, Jackie Chan would start to emerge as key players in the late 90s American action movie genre. But their exodus to the United States is a result of something far more sinister.
帶一班人。黑社會你夠唔夠人山口組勁又唔夠，你夠唔夠人黑手黨勁你又唔夠啊！人哋嗰啲拍戲㗎，你係拍得好有公正㗎嘛？你幾多價錢我俾你幾多價錢，你係咩期俾我咩期俾人哋係照呢個遊戲去玩。有啲人係唔係？你係幾多價錢㗎？你係10萬我俾你1萬，我仲要日日要有期嘅。呢啲咪唔按住呢個規矩做戲咯？你明唔明白？做又唔係做大嘢喎，係打人2巴啊，打人架車啊，一有事啊，射咗佢啊，
While geopolitical events like the 1997 handover of Hong Kong from Great Britain and Northern Ireland to the People's Republic of China had substantial effects on the Hong Kong movie industry, along with declining interest in kung fu action movies, it would be the Chinese mafia that would contribute to the Hong Kong to Hollywood movie star migration of the late 90s. Organizations like the 14K Triads and the Sun Yee-on were notorious within the Hong Kong movie industry, using tactics such as extortion to control the Hong Kong film industry. Events such as the slapping of Hong Kong pop star Anita Mui by 14K Triad member Wong Long-wai, and the Triad-related murder of film producer Choi Chi-ming, who was also the manager of Jet Li, would be a major catalyst for Hong Kong's brightest and most celebrated action movie stars to head to Hollywood. Movies like Rush Hour, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and of course The Matrix would set the foundation for the Hong Kong cinema-influenced film aesthetics that would be the framework for a Shang Chi movie. And while America would have a surge of early 2000s films with Chinese actors, consecutive box office failures and a lack of creative input from Hong Kong film legends like Jackie Chan and Donnie Yen would lead them to head back to Hong Kong and would create a void of bankable Chinese action movie stars in Hollywood. In fact, American films would shift their focus from the Hong Kong style of martial arts choreography to a more grounded and tactical style of on-screen fighting. This change would be a reflection of what I feel is Hollywood's agenda to whitewash the American martial arts movie genre. While Hollywood would produce a series of Asian American action movie one-hit wonders like Robin Shou, Philip Reed, and Jason Scott Lee, they wouldn't manage to gain the same cultural significance of white martial arts movie actors like Chuck Norris, Steven Seagal, and Jean-Claude Van Damme. So with that being said, why does Shang Chi, a D-list Marvel Comics character from an outdated genre of mass media, get a major blockbuster movie in the year 2021? Well, the answer to that question isn't complicated. The importance of a Chinese-American movie star-driven franchise in the 21st century is very much connected to the geopolitical relationship between China and the United States. The US and China will be two of the most competitive economic superpowers in the entire world, especially in the realm of filmmaking. In the 2010s, we would see the Chinese film industry expand into one of the largest movie markets in the entire world. And as of the writing of this video in 2026, they would be the most dominant and financially successful movie industry in the entire world. So that alone should be a major factor in the production of a big budget Shang-Chi blockbuster film. But it's not. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings wouldn't be greenlit to appeal to a Chinese audience, which is pretty obvious considering it was banned in mainland China when it was released. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings would be created to appeal to a Chinese American audience. At its core, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is more than just another kung fu superhero movie. It's a movie about the Chinese American immigrant experience. This change was done to subvert traces of any negative Asian stereotypes from the character's previous history. In the hands of a non-Asian writer and director, Shang-Chi could have wound up reeking of the same creative missteps as Marvel's other martial arts live-action adaptation, Netflix's Iron Fist. Director Destin Daniel Cretton and writer Dave Callaham injected the film with a wide variety of Chinese cultural signifiers. While there are a lot of elements that make Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings work as a film, the most essential and important element that makes the movie work as a fresh recontextualization of a character so deeply tied to Asian misrepresentation is Shang-Chi himself. Simu Liu.
We've been, it's been a really in-depth search to try to find somebody who will capture this character with all the dimensions that he deserves. And it's going pretty well. We found him.
Do you want to?
You guys want to meet him? It is a huge honor for me to introduce you to the incredible Simu Liu.
The son of Chinese immigrants, Simu Liu would originally pursue a career in accounting but would decide early on that his true passion was acting. He would start his career as a background actor in Canadian television and film. Simu Liu would gain notoriety for his role on the critically acclaimed sitcom Kim's Convenience. A gifted singer and dancer with a background in performance-based martial arts, Simu Liu would be more than just another Bruce Lee copy and paste character bathed in Orientalism. The Marvel Cinematic Universe's version of Shang Chi is a boyish, low-key, reluctant warrior and an avatar of the Asian American diaspora experience. For those that don't know, the Asian diaspora represents a population of Asian people who migrate, live, and assimilate in regions outside of Asia. While it might not seem like it, diaspora theory is a major part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. MCU franchises like Black Panther, Ms. Marvel, and of course, Shang Chi, all deal with ethnocentric diasporic narratives. 2018's Black Panther deals with African anti-colonialism and diaspora trauma, while the 2022 Disney Plus miniseries Ms. Marvel deals with Muslim pride from the perspective of a second-generation Pakistani American immigrant teenage superhero, and Shang-Chi deals with the intersection of Asian masculinity, martial arts philosophy, and Chinese immigrant identity crisis. Identity crisis and personal duality are major character themes throughout the movie, with many of the main characters existing in a state of personal polarity. Shang-Chi represents the polarity between cultural assimilation and cultural affirmation. The film introduces Shang-Chi as an average Chinese young man who works as a parking valet in San Francisco. This introduction is a representation of the theme of assimilation. This assimilation into American culture results in him being an incredibly mediocre adult. At the start of the film, both Shang-Chi and Katie, played by Awkwafina, exist in opposition of Chinese model minority myths rooted in academic and white-collar success. It isn't until they embrace their Chinese heritage in the city of Ta Lo that they become fully realized individuals. This film goes out of its way to dispel and challenge various stereotypes of Chinese Americans. One of those stereotypes is the Asian model minority myth. So, what is the Asian model minority? Well, I'll let Dr. Ellen Wu explain that.
So my book is the first to tell the story of the invention of what's called the model minority stereotype of Asian Americans. So today in American society, many people often, when people think of Asian Americans, they think of like the tiger mom, or they think of, hyper smart, academically driven, a successful minority group. And a lot of people explain that as an outcome of so-called, Asian or like Confucian culture. But before World War II, in fact, dating back to the middle of the 19th century, the United States in general marginalized and discriminated and really despised immigrants from Asia and their children. So as a historian, I really wanted to understand how basically in American culture, this astonishing change or evolution from the yellow peril to the model minority, I wanted to figure out how that happened. And
Simu Liu completely recontextualizes what it means to be a Chinese action hero in American cinema. Simu Liu's Shang-Chi exists as a subversion of two of the most prominent kung fu movie masculine archetypes: the stoic warrior out for revenge, which was popularized by Bruce Lee, and the oblivious, perpetually Chinese fish out of water kung fu fighter, which was popularized by Jackie Chan and Jet Li. The film actually uses martial arts as a means of Shang-Chi reaffirming his relationship with Chinese culture. Each of Shang-Chi's fights in the film are revelatory in the shedding of Shang-Chi's Americanized identity in favor of his Chinese heritage. Shang-Chi's first fight is on the bus against his father's assassins. The purpose of this fight is to reveal that Shang isn't a milquetoast man-child. He's Shang Chi, master of Kung Fu. Shang Chi's second fight is against his sister, Xu Xialing. This fight is used to reveal aspects of Shang Chi's background before he came to America. It's revealed that Shang Chi ran away from home to avoid becoming one of his father's assassins. But in doing so, he abandoned his sister, who now resents him. Xu Xialing is played by Ming'er Zhang. This would be her feature film debut. Xialing isn't a character from the comic books. In fact, she's a composite of at least 3 characters from the Shang Chi comics: Xing Baoyu, Sister Dagger, and Sasha Hammer. Xu Xialing is an essential part of the film and a major stepping stone in Chinese representation for women. While America has embraced many of the men of Hong Kong cinema, very few, if any, Chinese women have been able to have prominence in American blockbuster action films. While actresses like Michelle Yeoh have managed to be a shining star in major Hollywood films, she's very much an anomaly. In most cases in American cinema, Asian women function as racially charged submissive stereotypes who are often just objects of sexual and romantic desire for men, specifically white men. Ironically, it would be Hong Kong cinema that would produce some of the first female action movie stars. Actresses like the late legendary Cheng Pei Pei, Angela Mao, and the first ever Hong Kong female kung fu movie star, Chen Xiang, who was actually the grandmother of Sammo Hung, would all be pioneers of Chinese female action cinema. This film is deliberate in its attempt to address gender inequality within Chinese culture. The suppression of women in Chinese culture is a long-standing and pervasive issue, and Xu Xialing exists as a cinematic example of this problematic societal issue. A recurring theme in Xialing's story is about how she's neglected and disregarded by the men in her life, and how that's the motivation for her to become what is essentially the very first Chinese female Marvel Cinematic Universe girl boss. Correction. Second Chinese Marvel Cinematic Universe female girl boss. While Shang-Chi is allowed to train as an assassin under his father's instructions, Xu Xialing is prohibited from learning martial arts. Xialing exists as a subversion of the Confucius idea that Chinese women are supposed to be seen and not heard.
Just nod, don't talk. He'll forget you're there. That's how I survived.
He always treated you like that?
I wasn't allowed to train with the boys. But I watched everything they did and taught myself to do it better.
Women occupy an interesting space in the world of Shang-Chi. Instead of using women as romantic anchors within his character arc, Chinese women are used as familial vessels for his personal development. Shang-Chi's most significant relationship in the film is with his best friend Katie. While it would have been obvious for Katie to be a love interest, the film uses her as a positive reflection or complementary counterpoint to his sister Xialing. Katie is also a subversion of just about every female Asian stereotype in American film. Katie is neither submissive or hypersexualized or a model minority. Katie represents the domesticity that Shang-Chi craves after running away from his father and sister. Instead of being intense and driven like Xu Xialing, Katie is an easygoing slacker and very much a replacement sister for Shang-Chi. Nora Lum, or as she's better known, Awkwafina, is probably one of the most important figures of 21st century Asian American female representation. Born to a Korean mother and Chinese father who were both first-generation Asian immigrants, Awkwafina is awkward, quirky, and contemporary in a way that Asian women are rarely allowed to be in mainstream entertainment. While controversial and problematic to some for accusations of cultural misappropriation, which, considering her use of Black American cultural signifiers to build and sustain a career in entertainment while doing nothing to uplift Black people, is valid, I also think there's a value to Awkwafina. While I know some people will disagree, her existence as a subversive version of traditional Asian female stereotypes in mass media is incredibly important for multifaceted Asian female representation. But this?
Yellow bitches living fancy, getting beef like Kobe. Us yellow bitches dating white boys that look just like Moby.
that's not pushing the culture forward, man. Shang Chi's third fight is against the Death Dealer. This fight represents Shang Chi coming face to face with the nature of his childhood training as an assassin in China. While the fight on the bus was a display of his skills as a fighter, it would be this fight that would showcase his potential for killing. This version of the Death Dealer is different than the comics. In the comics, the Death Dealer is a villainous MI6 agent named Li Qinglin, who works for Fu Manchu, and who only appeared in about 4 issues of the Master of Kung Fu comics in the early 80s. The movie version of Death Dealer is a remixed version of the character, Cho Lin, who was the teacher of Shang-Chi in the comics. The Death Dealer is portrayed by Andy Lay from the popular YouTube channel, Martial Club. It was intense training from the Death Dealer under the instructions of his father, Wen Wu, that left Shang-Chi hardened and traumatized, but also conflicted about what kind of man he should become. It would be Shang-Chi's fight against the Death Dealer that would serve as a reunion between Shang-Chi and his father, the Mandarin, who's portrayed by the legendary Tony Leung. As one of Hong Kong cinema's greatest living actors, Tony Leung would technically be the 3rd actor to portray the Mandarin in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Iron Man 3 would be the first live-action incarnation of the Mandarin. This version of the Mandarin would be a hired actor named Trevor Slattery, who acted as a decoy for the villainous scientist billionaire Aldrich Killian, who was inspired by the true Mandarin, Wen Wu. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has spent the last 13 years trying to rehabilitate the racist subtext of the Mandarin, and what better way to do that than to cast Tony Leung? Originally a villain of Tony Stark, the Mandarin is a character that many people have viewed as problematic. Constructed from negative Yellow Peril stereotypes, like many other Asian characters in American comics during the mid-20th century, Tony Leung's version of the Mandarin is a pure representation of old-school Chinese masculinity. Or Wen Wu. The name Wen Wu is actually a reference to the Confucian philosophical concept of the duality of man. In Confucianism, Wen and Wu represent the dichotomous nature of masculinity. Wen represents civility, and Wu represents physical strength. Wen Wu is a character that's philosophically bifurcated and exists as the purest representation of the movie's overall theme of personal duality. This film gives us 2 Wen Wus. Our introduction to Wen Wu shows him as a violent warlord on a quest for power. It isn't until he meets Yin Ling in the city of Ta Lo and falls in love and starts a family that we see Wen Wu embrace civility. Wen Wu's fight against Ying Li in the city of Ta Lo is the first example of the film using martial arts philosophy to display the importance of harmonious balance. Most martial arts films over the past 25 years that have been produced in America rarely explore the philosophical nuance of martial arts. American films that feature Chinese martial arts in the 21st century often take a very vapid approach to displaying martial arts and only focus on kicking and punching that rarely mean anything philosophically, which, in my opinion, is connected to narrow understandings of Asian culture from non-Asian filmmakers. The film is filled with philosophical kung fu contrasts, with the 2 most prominent styles of kung fu in the film being Hung Gar and Tai Chi. Ying Li and Wen Wu have opposing fighting styles, with Wen Wu using the aggressive and masculine style of Hung Gar Kung Fu, and Ying Li using the soft, fluid, and feminine style of Tai Chi Chuan. Their fight is an homage to the Chinese fantasy genre known as Xinxia. For those not familiar, Xinxia is a genre of film and literature that focuses on mythic and sometimes immortal Chinese folk heroes with skills in mystical martial arts. In fact, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings recontextualized Shang-Chi from a Bruce Lee-style kung fu exploitation comic book character to a full-fledged Xinxia superhero. Even the Ten Rings are recontextualized from the original comic book version, which were magical finger rings worn by the Mandarin, to cosmic iron rings that are based on Tiawan, or iron rings which are typically used in Hung Gar Kung Fu. The 3rd act of the film takes place in the city of Ta Lo. In the comics, Ta Lo would make its first appearance in Thor, issue 301, and would be one of the extra-dimensional god realms in Marvel Comics. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Ta Lo is unlike anything we've ever seen in American film. Majestic and beautiful, the city of Ta Lo is based on the Chinese Taoist realm of Da Lo Tian. In Chinese mythology, Da Lo Tian is the highest realm of the 36 Taoist heavens and is home to several Taoist immortal beings like the legendary Sun Wukong from the novel Journey to the West. The people of Ta Lo are also one of the first blockbuster representations of ancient Han Chinese society in American film. For those not familiar, the Han Chinese represent the foundational aspects of old Chinese culture, with everything from Buddhism, Confucianism, art, language, and clothing being key aspects of the culture. In the film, Ta Lo is the birthplace of Shang Chi's mother, Ying Li, and would serve as a major point of character development for Shang Chi. Throughout the first half of the film, we see Shang Chi existing as a spiritually unbalanced and unrealized young man. It will be training under his aunt, Ying Nan, that would be the starting point for Shang Chi attaining a type of spiritual enlightenment.
You are a product of all who came before you. The legacy of your family, the good and the bad. It is all a part of who you are. Stop hiding, nephew. It only prolongs the pain.
Wenwu arrives in Ta Lo to rescue Ying Li, who he believes is being held captive in a cave, but it's revealed that it's the demon known as the Dweller in Darkness, impersonating Ying Li, who is using Wenwu to help free him from captivity. Shang-Chi and the people of Ta Lo face off against Wenwu in the Ten Rings, which leads to the final fight of the film. Shang-Chi's fight against Wenwu is more than just a typical kung fu movie showdown. It's a battle for spiritual balance. This fight is the physical representation of the Zen Buddhist quote that states, "If you meet Buddha, then kill Buddha. If you meet your father, then kill your father." What this means is that in order to achieve true enlightenment, you must reject all external authority figures and idols and find spiritual balance within yourself. Shang-Chi's character arc in the film is about him achieving personal and spiritual balance. His relationship with his father created an imbalance within his spirit. In order for Shang-Chi to achieve enlightenment, he has to be more than his father's expectations of him. Wenwu trained Shang-Chi to be an assassin, which goes against his kind and easygoing personality. Shang-Chi and Wenwu's conflict is a conflict between generational ideological dichotomies of Chinese masculinity. Shang-Chi represents progressive Chinese masculinity. He's the embodiment of a far more aspirational version of modern Chinese manhood. Rather than being motivated by a lust for power and dominance like Wenwu, Shang-Chi is empowered through balance, harmony, and his relationships with women. In fact, it would be the training he received from his mother Ying Li and his aunt Ying Nan that would help Shang-Chi to defeat Wenwu. Shang-Chi and Wenwu's fight is broken into two segments, with the first half showing Shang-Chi fighting as his father trained him, using direct and aggressive techniques. It isn't until he starts to use his mother's style, which is the style that defeated Wenwu earlier in the film, that Shang-Chi starts to gain the upper hand. While Shang-Chi doesn't directly defeat Wenwu, it would be the Dweller in Darkness that would steal Wenwu's soul. In his last moments of life, Wenwu passes the 10 rings on to Shang-Chi. Philosophically, this represents Shang-Chi becoming Wenwu, or the purest representation of the balance between the warrior and the civilized man. While he had the name for 1,000 years, Wenwu was actually a poor representation of the Wenwu concept. He was never able to balance his capacity for violence with his capacity for civility. His version of masculinity was defined by his desire for control, whereas Shang-Chi's masculinity was defined by self-control. When it's all said and done, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings will be remembered as an important milestone in Asian representation in American film. But is that enough? Can decades of cinematic xenophobia and racism be rectified by box office success? Probably not. It's important to understand how mass media plays an important role in humanizing and legitimizing the existence of marginalized groups in American culture. Because mass media is one of the major pillars of social indoctrination in American society, and social indoctrination is tied to nationalism, and nationalism is tied to white supremacy, the idea of multicultural diversity and representation in American entertainment is a difficult concept for some people to grasp. While there have been other critically acclaimed and successful films with Asian leads released in America, they often exist as outliers and examples that movie studios only see non-white films as cinematic exceptions to the rule. Shang Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings would enter theaters on September 3rd, 2021. Originally intended to be released on Friday 12th, the first day of Chinese New Year, the film would be greatly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2020, the production of the film would be put on hiatus due to the COVID pandemic quarantine. In fact, the COVID pandemic would affect Asian Americans in a horrible way.
Okay, why do you keep calling this the Chinese virus? There are reports of dozens of incidents of bias against Chinese Americans in this country. Your own aide, Secretary Azar, says he does not use this term. He says ethnicity does not cause the virus. Why do you keep using this? A lot of people say it's racist.
It's not racist at all, no, not at all. It comes from China.
Due to the audacious and overt racism of Donald Trump towards Chinese people during the COVID pandemic, Asian Americans would be victims of some of the harshest acts of hate crimes in the 21st century. Fast forward to now, 2026, with films like Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Crazy Rich Asians becoming major, critical, and box office successes. Is it fair to say that Asian representation is in a modern renaissance? Well, the answer to that question is complicated and requires nuance. The conversation regarding multicultural representation in American entertainment will always be difficult because of who controls the means of production. American entertainment is built on mythologizing white masculinity, and an Asian superhero being part of the cultural standard for American heroism is, well, a possibility, but never part of the plan. Since the release of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings 5 years ago, Simu Liu has continued to work in film and television, mostly in supporting roles, with many of his projects going under the radar, which is not a reflection of him as an actor. I think Simu Liu is a gifted and charismatic performer and a natural movie star. I think the real issue is that Hollywood is built on centralizing white men in all areas of mass media, so much so that multicultural representation in American entertainment is often and incorrectly labeled as forced diversity, which is absurd because you can't force diversity. Diversity and multiculturalism are built into the fabric of not only American culture, but the planet Earth, which is why it's important that every culture and race that makes up the DNA of the world deserves a seat at the table of positive representation in mass media. So, here we are, 5 years later, and still no announcement or even a cameo in the Marvel Cinematic Universe from Shang-Chi, who was one of the most popular and well-liked characters of Phase 4 of the MCU. While there was an announcement that he will be making an appearance in the upcoming Avengers Doomsday film, we still don't have any major announcements on when a Shang-Chi sequel starts production. Which brings up an interesting question. How do you follow up Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings and make it just as culturally significant and resonant as the first film? What type of Chinese philosophical and cultural signifiers do you draw inspiration from to make a movie that properly represents Chinese culture a second time? Or even possibly a third time? Well, I don't have the answer to that question. I do know that I don't want Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings to be lightning in a bottle. While Simu Liu has justifiably been critical of how limited Asian representation is in Hollywood, I'm looking forward to the day where we don't have to fight for a seat at the table or hear ignorant criticisms about forced diversity, especially in geek culture, which, in case you haven't noticed, from all the Japanese anime and video games and Korean pop music, is built on multicultural diversity. Whether or not you agree or disagree with me or Simu Liu's critiques regarding a lack of diverse representation in Hollywood, I think it's important to understand that American entertainment shouldn't be isolated to just one cultural experience. It should represent every single race, color, and creed of the human experience.
When I look at you, I see a guy who is a movie star, who is now a Broadway actor, Broadway star, who I know from a sitcom in Canada. I see a guy who's made it. When you look at yourself right now, what do you see?
I think I see a guy that's very much still fighting, and I very, very much appreciate what you say, and I think the people closest to me are always trying to remind me of that. But I think I have my own battle to fight. I think obviously I wake up every day with the perspective that I have been deeply, deeply blessed with the life that I have, and I'm very, very privileged to be in my position. But yeah, there's, I think, just a sense of there's so much work left to be done, And when you really think about it, in my career, I've only had, other than Shang Chi, and the Copenhagen test, those are my only two kind of really leading, starring vehicles. And that's just speaking to me. But then I kind of broadening that a little bit. I mean, how many leading starring vehicles have there ever been for Asian Americans, Asian Canadians? Not that many. I think you see us really pop up as the supporting leads, supporting characters. And, I think I've always believed that we deserve to be the heroes of our stories as well. We're not, we're not background characters in our own lives. It's us. And we deserve to be seen that way. And when we turn on the screen, when we go to the movies, we deserve to, see characters that reflect that. And not every character, mind you, but there should be some sort of representation of that.